It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10. Our top story. Missing more than 2 miles down, Coast Guards widen the search for the sub on its way to the Titanic. If it's intact, its passengers, including a British billionaire and a father and son, will have around a day and a half of air left. The search is battling the elements off the coast of Newfoundland. We'll report from there tonight. Plus, the president's son pleading guilty to a court and sparking fury from Joe Biden's opponents. The social influencer condemned as toxic and now charged with rape and human trafficking.
What do we say then?
King of Germany.
So I say, Your Majesty.
Yes.
The man who would be king, we speak to one of the figureheads of Germany's far right, as the country's security services warn their numbers are growing. Picture perfect, the royal seal of approval for a reopened National Portrait Gallery. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30. A very good evening. The search for the missing submersible, which was on its way to the wreck of the Titanic, has already covered an area nearly the size of Wales. There is no sign yet, though, of the Titan. The US Coast Guard says its 5 passengers, if the sub is intact, would have around 36 hours of oxygen left by now. The 8-day expedition, now missing at sea, set off from Newfoundland on Canada's east coast. It travelled from there to the Titanic site, which is just under 400 miles off the coast. The Canadian research icebreaker Polar Prince, which was supporting the Titan, reportedly lost contact with the vessel about an hour and 45 minutes after it submerged. Our international correspondent John Sparks reports now from Newfoundland.
Summer hasn't troubled the North Atlantic this year. The seas are rough and visibility low to non-existent. It's a bad time to launch an international search and rescue mission. Crew members of the submersible, Titan, left this port just a few days ago. Now the operation to save them will be based from the same facility. And the leader of Newfoundland said it won't be easy.
We've had one of the worst springs on record, the worst spring since 1943, which of course is bad enough being on land. It's absolutely terrible being 600 kilometers off our shores. We're talking, 12-foot waves, heavy fog, very difficult search and rescue conditions.
These pictures of the submersible were taken moments before it began its descent. An experimental vessel made from carbon fiber and titanium, the owners said it could monitor the strength of its hull in real time. 1 hour and 45 minutes later, the support team lost contact. And at a press conference in Boston, the US Coast Guard said the vessel has still not been located.
Good afternoon. These search efforts have focused on both surface, with C-130 aircraft searching by sight and with radar, and subsurface, with P-3 aircraft were able to drop and monitor sonar buoys. To date, those search efforts have not yielded any results.
The names of all 5 crew members on the Titan are now known. British adventurer Hamish Harding is joined by the owner of the submersible, Stockton Rush. Prominent Pakistani businessman Shahzada Dawood and his son Suleiman are also on board. Both hold British citizenship. And we understand French explorer Paul-Henri Nagelet, oft referred to as Mr. Titanic, is also on the vessel. A close friend said he knew the risks.
But we knew this was going to happen at some point along the way. And knew darn well it would. And we knew all the difficulties there would be about how do you recover from that. If the sub is stuck on a shipwreck, if they lose batteries, if they're caught on the bottom some other way. And nothing was done about it.
The weighty responsibility of a deep-sea rescue now belongs to the governments of 2 nations. and a host of private actors.
They've seen tragedy on the high seas on this island before, and they've mounted complex rescue efforts from here as well. But no one, not the Americans, not the Canadians, have been involved in an operation like this. Not at these distances and not at these depths.
The Premier and the people of this province have offered their prayers, and they know that time is running out. John Sparks, Sky News, St John's, Newfoundland.
Well, the Titan submersible made multiple dives to the wreck of the Titanic in the last 2 years. It has a system which is supposed to detect early any breach of its hull under the pressure 2 miles down. Sky's Matthew Thompson has this now on the sub's design.
This is the Titan submersible. It's 6.7 metres or 22 feet long. Its hull is made out of carbon fibre and titanium, and it weighs nearly 10.5 tonnes, about the same as 6 cars, which, according to its operator, OceanGate, means it's lighter and cheaper to run than any other deep water sub. Titan is powered by 4 electric thrusters, which allow it to travel at a top speed of 3 knots or 3.4 miles per hour. And it's able to dive to depths of 4,000 metres, roughly 13,000 feet. OceanGate says it would take 2 hours to dive the roughly 3,800 metres to where Titanic lies. The vessel is designed to take 5 people with enough oxygen for around 96 hours. A porthole window at one end lets passengers peer out into the depths, and large screens display various data from cameras and scanners that are mounted on the outside. And it also has a system for monitoring the vessel's hull in real time, which means it's possible to analyse how the hull is coping under the extreme pressure. Now, in theory, that should give the pilot enough warning of any problems to safely return to the surface in plenty of time. The search for the missing craft is focused in the Atlantic Ocean, about 370 miles to the south of Newfoundland in Canada. And let's be clear, this is an incredibly remote part of the ocean. It's said to have an undulating seabed at a depth of nearly 13,000 feet, with the Titanic wreck lying in a trench. And that's so deep that Britain's highest mountain, Ben Nevis, would fit in nearly 3 times. So what are the conditions like at such depths? A former Royal Navy Rear Admiral gave us his assessment.
The pressure down at that level is about 2 tonnes per square inch, whereas, of course, at the surface it's just 1 atmosphere. So you've got that to contend with. So the pressure hull has to withstand that sort of weight, if you like. Secondly, it's very cold. And if they don't have any electricity, it's dark as well. So these are extreme survival conditions. But the critical thing is that the pressure hull withstands that pressure.
Now, this time-lapse shows marine traffic in the hours after the sub went missing. You can see that a number of ships start to move to the area where it disappeared. And according to OceanGate, the Titan made successful expeditions to the Titanic wreckage in both 2021 and 2022, and it's undergone more than 50 test dives, including, the company says, to a depth of nearly 4,000 metres.
Matthew Thompson there, and John Sparks joins us from Newfoundland tonight. Good evening to you, John. This complex search operation continues, and its coordination is being moved to where you are.
Yeah, that's right, Sally. I think one of the really difficult things here is that no one country or military or Coast Guard, no one private outfit, private company, have all the skills and the experience or all the specialist equipment that they need to perform a rescue operation like this. They have to work together. That's really complicated, but they do have to work together, and they have to do it quickly because time really has become the most precious commodity here. We heard from the US Coast Guard this afternoon. They said the oxygen and energy systems on the submersible Titan, they had about 40 hours left. That's probably 36 hours, about a day and a half by my reckoning. So the rescuers both have to reach this craft. If it is structurally sound, they have to reach it and then perform a rescue as well. And time truly is running out at this stage.
Certainly, it is a race against the clock. John, thanks very much. Now, you might expect President Biden's political opponents to be excoriating over his son's guilty plea to tax and firearms charges in court today. They were, but only over what former President Trump called a mere traffic ticket. He and other Republicans have called for Hunter Biden and his father to be investigated for what they allege is corruption. His parents simply said tonight they loved him and would support him as he rebuilt his life. From Washington, our US correspondent James Matthews has more.
He's not the Biden frontman, but in the background, he looms large.
And my youngest son, Hunter Biden, stand up, guys. I'm proud of you.
Hunter Biden is a treasured son. Politically, he troubles his father. Highly publicized criminal inquiries have now crystallized into 2 guilty pleas. They relate to 2 separate charges of failing to pay his taxes. A deal has been reached on a 3rd charge of wrongfully possessing a firearm, having failed to declare that he was a drug user. Hunter Biden should escape jail. His father didn't dodge accusations of bias. From Donald Trump, himself facing prosecution, there was this. Wow, the corrupt Biden Department of Justice just cleared up hundreds of years of criminal liability by giving Hunter Biden a mere traffic ticket. Our system is broken. Claims of corruption echoed through Republican ranks.
Because the question is it equal justice? So you have one leading opponent of the current president that is now indicted, is supposed to do jail time. You have a president's son that the investigation went on for a very long time, that now has to do no jail time.
Hunter Biden is the youngest son of the current US president. He's put his crimes down to struggles with drug use following the death of his older brother, Beau, calling it a period of turmoil and addiction. In the same period, he handed his laptop to a repairman in Delaware. When he didn't return to collect it, the repairman says alongside self-made pornography, it contained evidence that Hunter Biden used his father's influence in foreign business dealings.
I'm very proud of my son.
Said the father as the news broke. Legally, it marks the end of a chapter in the story. Politically, it remains an open book. James Matthews, Sky News, in Washington.
The social media influencer Andrew Tate is already facing allegations of rape here in the UK. Now, prosecutors investigating him in Romania have charged him with rape, human trafficking and forming a criminal gang to exploit women. He denies both the British and Romanian allegations. Our Europe correspondent Adam Parsons reports.
6 months after he was first arrested, Andrew Tate knows his fate. Now charged with some of the most serious crimes imaginable: rape, human trafficking and organised crime. Tate is under house arrest at his home, a converted industrial unit in the suburbs of Bucharest. His response to the charges came through social media, first saying, "I'm sure this case has absolutely nothing to do with stealing my wealth," and then telling nearly 7 million Twitter followers, "This isn't about whether you like me or not. This is about all of us. Today it's me, tomorrow it's you. Nobody is safe from these lies."
Chicks just stuck in their house, sitting there, bored, completely in love with me. And of course, they don't go out. They're not allowed out.
Tate's profile is built on online content that's targeted at teenage boys and young men. Critics claim it's misogynistic, violent and dangerous.
Ask the politicians, ask the judges, you're getting closer to the truth.
It's alleged that he and his brother Tristan used physical and mental intimidation to force women into producing pornographic content. It's why the alleged victims, and those who've worked with them, insist that these women are victims of violence, trafficking and coercion.
Sex trafficking is not always someone being locked in chains and held in a dungeon. Quite typically, the most common form of coercion that traffickers use is psychological manipulation. So someone can go to a grocery store or even look like they're smiling in a video, but be being sex trafficked.
It's now up to the Romanian courts to decide if and when this trial will take place. Andrew Tate has moulded himself into a brash, unapologetic celebrity. A court will decide if he's actually a violent criminal. Adam Parsons, Sky News.
Austerity wasn't to blame for the poor response to the COVID crisis in the UK, its architect told the COVID inquiry today. Instead, it had created the fiscal space to address it, said former Chancellor George Osborne. Just like his ex-boss, David Cameron, he defended the then government's actions, as our correspondent, Sadia Chowdhury, reports.
Please, I would make one point. Please just let me ask my question.
A fiery exchange between the former Chancellor of the Exchequer and the COVID inquiry lawyer.
If someone had said...
It was George Osborne's turn today to defend his work. And not just defend. He took credit for helping us survive the pandemic. From the furlough scheme to avoiding a banking crisis to funding the vaccine programme.
In 2020, it turned out to be fairly easy and rapid to be able to put those support systems in place. Through the programme we pursued as a government, we created the fiscal space so we could end up spending £370 billion to help people deal with all the adverse effects that the lockdown introduced.
If Mr. Osborne was looking for a thank you, this isn't the place. The COVID inquiry is trying to establish whether his Treasury had planned for a pandemic. Their witness today told them in no uncertain terms it hadn't.
No one I'm aware of anywhere in the Western world, maybe anywhere in the world, said, you know what governments should prepare for? They should prepare for a coronavirus pandemic that will require us to lock down the entire economy for months on end. Obviously, if someone had said that, then there would be a legitimate question, which is, why are you preparing for it? But unfortunately, no one did.
Like his boss the day before, Mr. Osborne left the inquiry refusing to accept any blame. He'd been forced to defend his austerity regime because earlier this week there'd been suggestions that he and David Cameron had left the health service depleted. That came from the Doctors' Union, the Trades Union Congress, and some bereaved family members. Now it's up to the inquiry chair to say whether she agrees. Sadia Chowdhury, Sky News, at the COVID inquiry in London.
One claims that Russia is Germany's natural partner, not enemy. Another calls himself the king of the country. Both are faces of the German far right who've spoken to Sky News. Germany's domestic intelligence agency says the country's right-wing extremism is the greatest threat to democracy there, with nearly 40,000 active members. Our Europe correspondent, Siobhan Robbins, reports from Wittenberg in the self-proclaimed Kingdom of Germany.
In Germany, an old threat with a changing face. The far right has been named the biggest danger to democracy here. While some extreme groups are easy to recognise, 2 hours outside Berlin, a less well-known community is also being monitored by the authorities. This is the headquarters of the self-proclaimed Kingdom of Germany.
How do I address you?
And today I'm meeting their self-appointed king.
What do we say then?
King of Germany.
So I say, Your Majesty.
Yes.
The authorities list them as extremists who want to take control of Germany and overthrow the current system.
So you've got own driving licence, own identity card, own passport.
Yes, own currency, own.
The German intelligence agencies class the kingdom as part of a growing Reichsbürger movement. 23,000 people who reject the legitimacy of the post-war German state. In December, 25 people were arrested for plotting to storm the parliament and overthrow the government.
Jede Form von Gewalt führt zu einer anderen.
While King Peter wants change, he says his group would never use violence.
Es ist das Ziel sozusagen, die Regierungsgewalt in Deutschland vollständig zu übernehmen. Aber nur dann, wenn die Menschen es wollen.
The Reichsbürger coup plot failed, but more than 38,000 people across Germany are now classified as right-wing extremists, a major concern for the authorities.
Die größte Gefahr für Demokratie und Sicherheit geht nach wie vor vom Rechtsextremismus aus.
We were attacked.
Suleiman Malik received death threats from the far right while trying to build his mosque. One day, he arrived to find this.
This is a pig head, and this is what I found here when I came.
Pork scattered around the planned place of worship.
Do you think there would be a lot of support if there was a coup that installed a right-wing government?
Yes, there will be.
You think there is?
Yes, there will be. There is.
Why?
Because they see that this is the solution.
Suleiman's particularly worried about the rocketing popularity of the AFD, a far-right party in Parliament that's also on the watch list.
Are you divisive? Are you dangerous?
Wir sind das Gegenteil von gefährlich und wir spalten auch die Gesellschaft nicht. Wir wollen Deutschland erhalten, das ist unser Auftrag.
But left-wing opponents say Germany is being split in two. History has shown the terror unleashed by an uncontrolled far right here. Some fear, amid growing discontent, extremism could dominate again. Siobhan Robbins, Sky News, Germany.
The former First Minister of Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon, has returned to Holyrood for the first time since being arrested by police investigating the SNP's finances. She is still resisting calls to stand down as an MSP, insisting she has done nothing wrong.
Would it be the best thing for you to temporarily step back, as some of your colleagues have suggested?
I search my soul on these questions. What that would do, I think, would be to compromise my ability and my right to assert the position that I hold absolutely, which is that I have done nothing wrong.
The man accused of murdering 3 people and attempting to kill 3 others in Nottingham will go on trial in January. Valdo Kalokani appeared at Nottingham Crown Court today, charged with murdering 19-year-old students Barnaby Webber and Grace O'Malley Kumar and 65-year-old school caretaker Ian Coates, and the attempted murders of 3 pedestrians. And the judge hearing the phone hacking case brought against Mirror Group newspapers has questioned if several people, including former editor Piers Morgan, could and should have given some evidence in court. A former Mirror journalist this week told the court Mr. Morgan had explained how to hack a phone. Now, they call England's new aggressive style of cricket Bazball after the team's combative coach. But despite an enthralling first Ashes match, it did lead to defeat today as Australia won with 2 wickets to spare. Neither the fans nor players were downbeat, though, as our correspondent Inzamam Rashid reports from Edgbaston.
Day 5 of the first Ashes test began with nothing other than rain. But once the covers were removed and the players emerged, there was no greater reminder as to why Test match cricket is still very much alive. Just after half an hour, an early breakthrough.
Edged and gone.
After tea, England's target of 5 wickets soon became 4.
Oh, he's got him.
However, Australia stood firm, 200 up and moving closer to that winning total. But for big moments, you need big players.
Got him!
And they don't come much bigger than Ben Stokes. Captain Cummins had other ideas, hunting down the target with these lusty blows.
Up and over again, aggression.
With Nathan Lyon, the pair held their nerve, pressure soaked up until the very end. A win with 2 wickets to spare.
Cummins will come back for 2. Oh, he's knocked it over the boundary edge. And Australia are home.
The England captain disappointed but undaunted.
Losing hurts regardless of what you've done. Winning's always a great feeling, but you know, a loss is a loss. But you know, we're going to continue, keep coming at Australia in the way that we did.
You can have shorter formats of the game, you can enjoy franchise cricket across the globe, but it's clear, after 5 exhilarating days, Test match cricket is alive and kicking. The question is Bazball saving this game?
Love it, don't care that we lost. I love the way the game's going, very happy with everything.
Much more exciting to watch. It's much more enjoyable to be a fan, to see us play that way. It's brilliant.
It's good to see that aggressiveness and, it's good to see them back themselves and have that confidence.
Today wasn't England's day, but there were moments of magic. They'll now look to Lords in a week's time with hopes to level this series, which has already given so much. Inzamam Rashid, Sky News, Edgbaston.
Finally, some of the most photographed people in the country were part of the celebrations today as the home of portraiture, the National Portrait Gallery, reopened. Visitors will now be able to see some of Sir Paul McCartney's own photos of the early Beatles, as well as carved brass images of women created by Tracey Emin. It has royal approval too, as our arts and entertainment correspondent Katie Spencer reports, and we should warn you, this report contains flashing images.
It's only fitting, perhaps, that among the first to check out the National Portrait Gallery's multi-million-pound facelift, one of the most recognisable faces in Britain. After 3 years closed for a top-to-bottom refurbishment, its royal patron, the Princess of Wales, not only invited to look at one or two of its new acquisitions, but being shown the door, not figuratively, literally. Its jaw-dropping design by renowned artist Tracey Emin. Her 45 carved brass panels, an attempt to represent every woman throughout time, counterbalancing the prominent male figures who for over a century have dominated the building's facade.
It communicates a new message to our audiences and our visitors that this is a gallery for everyone, people of all backgrounds, ages, nationalities.
Adding to the gallery's star-studded comeback, a meet and greet for the Princess with Sir Paul McCartney, not demonstrating his singing skills, but his photography. Having unearthed these gems, images he thought he'd lost will be on show until the autumn, tracking his time in the Beatles just as the band were taking off. Grayson Perry among the stars, out for a special party celebrating the gallery's reopening. Its return coming at a time when images of individuals are now more abundant than at any other point in our history.
It's a necessary institution because we're all fascinated by identity now. You know, we're riveted by it, and everybody's taking pictures of themselves and building their kind of online profile. And so a place like this, it will respond to that desire for everybody to be a unique individual.
The warm reaction to the gallery's grand return, proving there's more to portraiture than just a pretty face. Katie Spencer, Sky News.
Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's papers in the press preview, including this story on the front of The Guardian, which says mortgage time bomb bailout calls split. Tories will definitely be talking about that. And tonight, we're joined by the journalist and broadcaster Jenny Kleeman and the Mail on Sunday's acting deputy political editor Claire Ellicott. This is Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. But first, our top stories. The search has been expanded for the submersible that went missing near the wreck of the Titanic. It's thought to have just over 35 hours of oxygen left. President Biden's son Hunter is likely to avoid a prison sentence after striking a deal with prosecutors over tax and firearms charges. And the former Chancellor, George Osborne, has told the COVID inquiry austerity made Britain better able to cope with the pandemic. Hello there, it's good to have you with us. You're watching the press preview. A first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. It's time to see what's making the headlines. Let's have a look at the front page of the Daily Mail. Their headline, 24 hours to save them. Unsurprisingly, that story is leading many of the front pages tomorrow. The Metro also leading with the last photo of the submersible before its journey to the wreck. The Sun interviews a man who says he was booked to travel on the missing vessel. Meanwhile, the Daily Star says the missing submersible is steered by a £42 video game controller. The Chancellor's summoned banks for mortgage talks but rules out aid to homeowners. That's on tomorrow's front page of the Financial Times. The Eye goes further, leading with a warning that the Tories face a UK mortgage time bomb. While The Guardian leads with mortgage time bomb, bailout calls split Tories. The COVID pandemic damaged a generation of young people. That's on the front of the Daily Telegraph. And a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's papers while you're watching us. And we're joined tonight by journalist and broadcaster Jenny Kleeman and the Mail on Sunday's acting deputy political editor Claire Ellicott. Great to have you both with us. Thanks so much for joining us. Jenny, let's kick off with the front page of the Metro. Like many of tomorrow's papers, leading on the missing sub. Their headline, Titanic sub, last photo, and focusing very much on this race against time in terms of the amount of oxygen they're estimating the team have left.
Yes, and also the fact that more details are emerging about the 5 people believed to be inside this submersible. 3 Britons, 1 aged just 19. But 3 of them, there's a father and son, that's the 19-year-old is the son, 3 of them are thought to be very experienced deep-sea adventurers. This has shone a light on a very expensive kind of adventuring. It's sort of disaster tourism that may have turned into a disaster itself, or at least wreck tourism. They paid £200,000 a passenger. They've gone down or tried to go down 3,800 metres. That's as low as the Alps is high. Extraordinary people in terms of wealth, but also willingness to take on a really serious adventure, I guess. So those details have been emerging today, and also the fact that other people who have been on the Titan, this submarine, to go down and see the Titanic, have been talking about how they knew of the risks, or perhaps suspected there were great risks, and had to sign waivers going down. It is 48 hours since it lost contact. And we found out today from the US Coast Guard that there are around 40 hours of breathable air left inside there, which means that by sort of Thursday morning, our time, the air is going to run out. So it is a race against time, and it is a search and rescue mission. Both parts of that are incredibly difficult, searching an area as large as Wales and trying to rescue people that far deep down. So there is a kind of incredible symmetry about this. It's like a disaster movie of a famous historical disaster. Is there going to be another massive loss of life here? It's rare for things to go wrong on a submersible. So lots of questions are being asked in the papers. But for now, we just have no idea what's going on aboard the submarine.
Yeah, Claire, the Daily Mail also leading with this story tomorrow morning. I was saying to someone today, it really reminds me of the coverage of the young football team in Thailand who were trapped in that cave and the whole world was rooting for them. But this time, it does seem to be far more challenging because there's just absolutely no idea where they are. And, of course, there's a huge expanse that they have to search.
I mean, this is truly the stuff of nightmares. There's 5 people trapped in this tiny object. It's only 22 foot long, I think, and they are thousands, probably thousands of meters under the sea's surface. It's absolutely impossible to search the sea. They talk about the surface of the moon being better explored than some of the depths of the ocean. It absolutely is just an impossible task, and the Coast Guard and all of the other agencies involved are truly in a race against time. There are 40 hours of air, they estimate, left in this submarine. It's unimaginable what the people in there are going through. It's just, and for their families as well. It's a fact that, you know, diving is a dangerous endeavour. They've gone down, I think it's 13,000 feet under the sea. The Titanic wreck is located. They were in really difficult weather conditions before they did the dive. And you know, we just don't know where they are. The US Coast Guard is saying they've had no luck so far. They've searched thousands and thousands of feet of the ocean with planes, with boats, and also I think they've got underwater drones looking for these people. But it is a really, really difficult task, and it is a real race against time. And it must be just unimaginable what their families are going through at the moment. It truly is, you know, a real reckoning.
Absolutely. I was speaking to one of the experts we've been interviewing earlier, and I said, you know, it's a needle in a haystack situation. And he said it would be easier to find a needle in a haystack. It really doesn't bear thinking about. But let's hold our breath. There's still time and there's still hope. Let's move on to one of the other main stories leading some of the papers tomorrow, Jenny. The front page of the Financial Times very much focusing on this concern over people's mortgages. One Tory MP calling it a mortgage bomb about to go off.
Yeah, a mortgage time bomb about to go off. That was Jake Berry of one of the Northern research group, Red Wall Seats. Martin Lewis, the big money-saving expert, has also used this phrase, mortgage time bomb about to go off. It is really worrying for people, and there are millions of people, I'm one of them, who are facing the end of their mortgage deals and seeing a huge jump in interest rates. Tomorrow, we are going to see the latest set of inflation figures, and inflation is expected to be down, but not very much, not by very much. We have still the most stubborn inflation and the highest level of inflation of all of the G7 countries. And Jeremy Hunt says he cannot provide assistance to people who have mortgages because that would make inflation worse. But he's under pressure from his fellow MPs to do so. I mean, this kind of thing is a real, vote winner, or rather it affects people at the ballot box, and not just people who have mortgages. Renters are facing an enormous squeeze. Rents are going up. Apparently, more renters are paying a greater proportion of their wage on rent than they have done for many years, simply because mortgage rates are so high, and interest rates are, of course, expected to go up yet again this year to the highest levels since 2008. So it is frightening times for a lot of people. And what's really worrying is that things don't seem to be getting better. Jeremy Hunt has said that he's going to talk to banks, and banks are going to help lenders they're going to help people with mortgages on a case-by-case basis, help people out if they can't pay. But it's not so much a question of not being able to pay. There are a lot of people who will just about manage to pay, but they are not going to be able to save any money, spend any money. And as we know, interest rates are going up, and they're going up on mortgages, but we're not feeling them so much on our savings. So bleak times ahead, I would say.
Yeah, it is rather bleak. It's hard to dress this up, isn't it, Claire? At the front page of The Guardian also leading with this line, the mortgage time bomb. And we could, of course, see interest rates go up again on Thursday. And I found it quite interesting to read earlier that 400,000 people are going to see their current mortgage deals end between July and September.
Yes, and this is a real worry for the Tories. We're going into an election next year. So Jeremy Hunt is under real pressure to do something as the Chancellor. But the facts are that if you start pumping money into the system, you will, in theory, trigger more inflation, which is one of the reasons why costs are so high at the moment anyway. So they're in a really difficult bind, and they're coming under real pressure from a lot of their MPs. Jake Berry, as we just mentioned, he's from a red wall seat in the Northern Research Group of Tory MPs. But in actual fact, I think some of the blue wall, some of the Tories' kind of more traditional supporters down south are going to be really, really hard hit by this. And the rates are going up a lot. You know, these are real noticeable differences for most homeowners. And, you know, it's not just affecting people at the lower end of the scale, it's affecting people in the middle classes who may find that they're mortgaged beyond what they can afford to pay. And the spectre of negative equity and, you know, people having to default on their loans is a real worry. So this is, I think, why Jeremy Hunt has called in the banks, I think on Friday, to speak to them about what possibly they can do. But the realities are that there aren't many levers at his control or even at the bank's control, because this problem is ingrained. We've got sluggish growth. You know, there's high levels of inflation. They're persistent. They don't seem to be coming down, despite this being one of Rishi Sunak's real priorities. And the facts are that these costs are being passed on to homeowners, which are, you know, the key group of voters that the Tories need to keep happy. And it's really looking perilous for the year ahead.
Yeah, certainly. Jenny, it's so worrying for so many people who are already struggling to make ends meet. And as Claire was saying there, you know, Jeremy Hunt is meeting with lenders on Friday, but the government has already said that they're not going to intervene financially.
Yeah, I mean, there's only so much that lenders can do. As I said before, they can help with people who are in desperate circumstances by helping them out without affecting their credit rating. But there's nothing really they can do. And, you know, Claire mentions a general election coming up in 2024. There are many by-elections coming up within a few months. And in fact, the Shadow Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, made the point today, quite clever, really. She found out, she did some number crunching, found out that 10,100 households in Boris Johnson's old seat of Uxbridge are going to be facing average mortgage costs that are an extra £2,700 a year. People think about this stuff because obviously the Labour Party are spinning this as being a direct consequence of Liz Truss's mini budget. Of course, the Conservatives would like to say that it's a consequence of the war in Ukraine, economic factors beyond their control. But I think most people feel that this is an avoidable crisis, that this comes out of mistakes that the Conservatives have made, and they have lost their reputation for financial competence. Jeremy Hunt is trying to claw that back. But this is something that they need to address, and not just before the next general election. They need to address it now, before all of these by-elections.
Claire, let's just squeeze in another story before the break. Front page of the Financial Times is also covering this story of Hunter Biden, Joe Biden's son, who's been charged with federal crimes. It's really interesting, isn't it? Because this is a story that's been followed very closely for a long time now in the US, but hasn't really cut through here in the UK in the same way.
Yes, I mean, Hunter Biden has been a way of attacking Joe Biden since he became the president. He's the sort of weak link in the president's camp. We've all seen those photos of him. He's in the past had addictions. He's, admitted to all sorts of things. And we've now seen these new charges. And the facts are that he is the convenient stick to beat Joe Biden with. And, the president's kind of enemies in the Republican camp will be making as much as they can of this. This is a member of Joe Biden's family. There's not really, there's not much he can do about it. It's just a sort of ongoing worry for the president. But, it remains to be seen what will happen as a result of this. But it does seem like everyone in the US in the future presidential elections does seem rather embroiled in a series of court cases at the moment. And, it'll be very interesting in the run up to the election, what happens there.
Yeah, it's contagious, isn't it? And certainly, Jenny, I mean, it was to be expected. Donald Trump came out speaking very critically, calling this a mere traffic ticket for Hunter Biden today. But some comparing his situation with the legal challenges facing Donald Trump, saying he should also just accept some charges and avoid going to trial.
Well, this massively plays into Donald Trump's hands, because he can say that the Department of Justice is on Biden's side and is letting his son off with a rap on the knuckles. You know, Hunter Biden is a private individual, and Donald Trump, he faced these federal charges for things that he directly had done. But nonetheless, this very much plays into how Donald Trump wants to spin things. He has been going on about Hunter Biden and his laptop for many, many years. Hunter Biden has had troubles for many years too, troubles with addiction. He's been struggling for a very long time, but he is not running to be president like Donald Trump is, or his dad is running for re-election. What's significant about this is the narrative that allows Donald Trump to spin about a corrupt system designed to be unfair to him. And this is something that will play really well, I think, with Donald Trump supporters.
OK, Jenny, Claire, we'll give you a bit of a breather. See you in just a moment. Thank you both so much. Do stay with us. We'll have more of our press preview next, including this on the front of the Telegraph, their headline, "Lockdown damaged a generation, says ex-CMO." That's the former chief medical officer. We'll be speaking about that after this short break.
Yeah, well, this is the expedition. It's frightening that it can even happen. The ice is disappearing. When the first person made it all the way through the Northwest Passage over 120 years ago, it took him, 3 or 4 years because he would get frozen in the ice, he'd get stuck there, and then he'd have 11 months stuck there, 2 weeks making forward progress, 11 months stuck there again, and so on. Whereas fast forward 120 years, and we have 3 to 4 months to make it all the way 2,000 miles because the ice is just making its way back more and more every year. Well, I'm starting in a place called Beiler Island and finishing Tuktoyaktuk at the other end of the Northwest Passage. There's 2,000 miles in between. I'm excited about doing this journey, but it's only facilitated by global warming. And as a result, I feel this great, responsibility to be a storyteller about what is happening up there and why it's important to us back here. Well, sometimes climate change is so big and so abstract that it can be difficult for people to process and therefore make changes in their own life. But if there's something that's so tangible, this place would have been frozen 100 years ago, 10 years ago, then it's easier for people to grasp the urgency. Wilderness Foundation is a charity that helps people get outdoors for their mental health and have therapy through their experiences in nature. And for me, my mental health really suffered after I attempted to row the Atlantic twice and both times failed. I really felt worthless and pathetic and overcome with these feelings of failure. And for me, a big journey back to getting into a position to take on an expedition like this was getting back into nature, setting myself challenges. And for me, I've been very privileged my whole life. It's been very easy for me to get into nature. I've had role models and easy access. But the Wilderness Foundation helps people from backgrounds who don't necessarily have that sort of easy access to have the same opportunities that maybe I took for granted as a kid. I've been kayaking a lot, obviously, but maybe not as much as people would expect. I've been given a lot of advice about maybe not taking on huge kayaks and burning myself out before I start. So I've been doing a lot of weight training, a lot of yoga. But the big thing for me is getting my skill level of kayaking up. Kayaking requires a lot of skill compared to something like ocean rowing. I've got to stay upright, be able to deal with breaking waves, land in surf, to be safe and to be fast.
Welcome back. You're watching the press preview. It's good to have you with us. And with me this evening is Jenny Kleeman and Claire Ellicott, kicking off again on some of the front pages and the stories in tomorrow's newspapers. Claire, let's speak about what's on the front page of the Daily Telegraph, if I may. The COVID inquiry, a really emotional testimony today from the former chief medical officer describing lockdown as damaging a generation.
Yeah, so this is Sally Davies, the former chief medical officer. She's been giving evidence to the COVID inquiry. And what she said is that lockdown was really damaging for a generation of children and for everyone else that was involved as well. Now, we all know how how difficult it was for the country, for the government to put the country into lockdown, and the real kind of consequences of this are only really being seen now. You have so many children who miss so much schooling, and people at university who miss schooling, people at work who just didn't get, the opportunities they should have done, and missed the chances to socialise with their colleagues and to have a well-rounded life. It's been a really, really difficult time for so many people, and the real, the former chief medical officer really emphasised that. The facts are that lockdown wasn't very good for the country, and especially not children at school who weren't able to go to lessons. We've seen, the government's tried to put in place some catch-up lessons, but it just hasn't had the effect that it should have done, and they've not been able to do the same, to just have the same opportunities they would have done. And it's really been difficult for a whole generation of people. And, the facts are that the COVID is over now, but we are still seeing the lasting effects of many of those decisions that were made at the time.
Jenny, I saw you shaking your head at moments there. I'll let you jump in with whatever you want to say.
Yes, of course, no doubt COVID was very damaging, and it was perhaps most damaging for young people who are least at risk of COVID. But I think Sally Davies was not saying that lockdown shouldn't have happened, because at the time we didn't have a vaccine and we didn't have any alternatives. And I think the Daily Telegraph is very anti-lockdown, has certainly shown itself to be so over the past few months, and so with its disclosure of lots of things to do with Matt Hancock's WhatsApps, it has an agenda. I'm a mother myself. I saw my children denied so many important years of their lives at school. But what was the alternative? That we let a lot of people die. I mean, one of the things that Dame Sally said today was that nobody thought about lockdowns, but that's because they were unthinkable at the time. I mean, nobody ever considered that in a democratic country that the state could order people to stay at home. But at the time, we did not know about COVID. We did not know about the risk. We didn't know who was at risk, and it was the only option that we had. So it's incredibly sad that people have been so badly affected by lockdown. And yes, a generation has been harmed. But what was the alternative? That we simply allowed hundreds of thousands of people to die? That's even more unthinkable, I would say.
And Claire, just a final thought from you. It was interesting, we heard from George Osborne as well, who defended austerity today. Claire, can you hear me okay?
Sorry, yes. So George Osborne, yes, the former Chancellor, he put in place a number of policies that meant that there were some of the services that were available to people didn't get the same sort of funding that they had done in the past. He's been blamed, obviously, for not being prepared for the pandemic as a result of that. He's obviously defended himself and said that, this wasn't to blame. But some members of the Conservative government have in the past said that, there wasn't the things in place to enable us to cope with this pandemic in the same way that we should have done. And we saw there was a lack of PPE, there was a lack of sort of integral planning, which meant that it was really difficult to put those supply chains in place when we needed them. And it was a real struggle to sort of get the country through this. And we saw time and again that there were contracts handed out to people who weren't deserving of them. There was so much taxpayers' money wasted, and it was a real error on the part of some of those who planned it in making sure that the country had what it needed.
OK, Claire, Jenny, thanks so much. We'll see you again next hour.